The Brutally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Starving Artist Brewing. Starving Artist Brewing may be a small speck on Michigan's beer map, but they say big things come in small packages. A brewery who really puts their money where their mouth is, supporting underground artists far and wide. Making delicious beers with the simple belief that you should judge beer, not people. Brutally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. For over 30 years, Rockabilia has been the go-to destination for all things band merch. With over 500,000 items in their online store and collaborations with today's hottest bands, you're sure to find something you love. Use our code BREW10 at checkout and take 10% off your total order. So go pick up your favorite new piece of merch now over at Rockabilia.com. And now, on to the show.
Say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Brutally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is the returning Steve Cobucci of Wolves at the Gate. This was a really fun chat. I really enjoyed having Steve on previously, which I guess if you haven't heard that episode, go back, check it out. In it, though, it's been kind of interesting. In the year-ish since we had that chat, there have been several times I've actually been thinking about Steve and a handful of other people that I've had on the podcast whenever we talk about house things or, you know, being more of a manly man and being able to fix and build things. That is not really in my skill set. And I had remembered when Steve and I had been talking that, you know, obviously he was kind of in the carpentry business. And so it was a thing where there have been times where I'm like, oh, it'd be so nice to have someone like Steve nearby so I can throw money at him to fix my house. Because honestly, like it's kind of funny as I'm actually going through the process with my wife of getting new doors installed in the house, that it is a thing where I have so many people who will say, like, especially like someone like my dad, who will be like, just, well, you could call me, you could call your uncles, you could call like all these people to come help you do this home project. And I have to reiterate every time, yeah, but then I have to wait on all of you. And the thing is, and you know, this sounds like a very like impatient thing, but it's twofold. Honestly, it is that I'm impatient to a degree because I would rather have something done pretty quickly and pay money for it. Because like there was a time where we were looking at getting our fence in the backyard, and I remember my dad's like, "Oh, I can come help you do that. It's real easy." And I go, "Yeah, but like I'm paying someone and they'll be here on like Wednesday and it'll be done Friday. Can you guarantee that it'll be done in like 2 days?" And he was like, "No, it'll probably be like 2 weeks or so." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not trying to do that." So it's a thing where I know YouTube is a thing. It's funny. I've actually been talking to a lot of people about the sort of the breakdown of our brains and how they work, and how some people are just really good at like math, for instance. Some people are just really good at math. Some people are really good at, you know, solving problems, math equations. Some people are their brain just works to do like home repairs and building things. Like some people just have this inept brain to do things that others can't. And it's so interesting when you kind of start figuring that out. And kind of the skill sets that are required to do those things. And it just becomes really interesting to see how people navigate potentially their shortcomings. I don't know necessarily that me not being able to do a ton of house projects or building things is a shortcoming. I think to a degree it's my understanding of what I'm not good at. And I could spend a lot of time and money to make problems for myself or somebody else. Or I could just honestly understand it's something that I have no interest in, I'm not good at, and I would rather pay someone who is good at doing it to do the job for me. There's also the reassurance that if someone fucks something up, that you are on the hook for the mistake you made, and that is also something to me that is worth the money. Sort of, not necessarily the peace of mind, although I guess that's there too, but just the understanding that if something goes awry, that there is sort of a contingency plan of getting it fixed, and it won't cost me anymore. The other thing too, though, about that is it's kind of funny how often I have people who, like, I have a friend of mine, Chris, who I've had on the podcast, when I was talking about plans I have, and this is kind of the funny thing too, is I have ideas for the house and how to do a lot of the projects that I would like to do and how things will look. I can't, other than walking you through my house and showing you what I'm thinking of doing and here's why and all that kind of stuff, I can't do any of it. But as we were talking, I was like, oh, I want to knock this wall down between these two bedrooms, create a master bedroom. I know this is a load-bearing wall, so we're going to go with a beam over here, and then da-da-da-da-da. And as I was explaining that it was a load-bearing wall and it's going to cost this much to knock it down and pay someone to put a beam in, he goes, well, you could do most of that yourself. Like, at my house, I got everything on the joists or hoists or whatever the fuck it's called, and I got it all squared away and then basically had them, put in the beam and do all that stuff. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. But it's definitely a thing where someone like Steve would be, quote, very handy to have around. And I would rather pay a local person to do a lot of those kind of things. A lot of the things in our house that we have had done, thankfully, I have friends, like I have been saying the last couple of minutes, that are more skilled in this thing. But it is also funny because sometimes, like my friend Chris, who is a tattoo artist and very accomplished at doing that, can also do all these crazy things, build things. Like, he built a deck at his house, and I was like, can I pay you to come do that at my house? Like, it's things like that where I'm just like, you're good at this thing and you're good at this thing? That's not fair. That's not fair. And then, same thing applies to Steve. You can sing, you can play guitar, you can do all these things, and you can also do this? That's not fair. That's not fair. So, all of that to say, let's get into my conversation with Steve, where we talk about all kinds of things, and I will talk to you on the other side of it. So it's funny. I don't know if you really believe in like kind of serendipity at all, or strange occurrences, but it was kind of interesting because like I had been thinking about trying to have you come back on the show because it's a little while, and then right when the email came out for this album, I had seen on Facebook it was the anniversary of like you coming in on the show and me putting it out, and I was like, there it is. So very fortuitous timing of like, yeah. I wanted to do it, and then it just kind of happened to work out, I guess, the way it was supposed to where you had something to come on and talk about, and that there was also just kind of a catching up kind of thing, like, which is fun. I talk all the time about how I used to think I hated the idea of having someone a repeat guest because I'm like, we already did it all the first time. What else is there to say? Whereas now I just understand it's like, that's not normal. That's not a normal way to have a conversation with somebody. And that sometimes conversations, take shape over the course of time and life happening to you. So kind of like I said, totally. Just serendipitous timing of you having something to come on and promote, because I wanted to have you come back on.
There it is.
Well, that and what other house projects have you gotten into? Because I know the last time you came on, we were talking about all the like different building and construction and stuff like that you have been doing. So,
I tore up my kitchen, so that's right now there is no floor. Well, actually, no, I put new floor in, but yeah, all the drywall's out. I just finished the duct work, and I've got electrical to do now. So That's the next one.
That is, I'm from a homeowner's perspective now, because since I last talked to you, my wife and I bought the house that we've been living in for like 11 years, 12 years. And that is something that is high on our list of things we want to do is redo the kitchen. Even to the point of last night, like, we need more counter space. It's like kind of almost galley style. Like, it's just too small for like two people to even exist in the same kitchen together.
Yeah, I know about that. Yeah. Well, I also blew out a wall, and so it was a little bit more than just the kitchen. But I had done that before, leading up to this, and about a couple weeks ago is when I was like, all right, we're ready to do this. So got all the cabinets. Now I just got to get after it. So that's what I've been keeping busy with.
Do you, because I don't remember if you and I talked about so much the designing aspect of things, but like, obviously we had talked about how much you were into kind of the idea of it's a blank slate. Now I can create something anew. And I guess that is design work, but I think, like, especially with kitchens, it's like, okay, like complementary colors, like, and accents and things going through, and continuity between the rest of the house and so forth. And I would be interested to do you find that part of everything fascinating? Because I feel and it scratched the same itch as like composing and writing music.
Yeah, I mean, so my dad was a kitchen and a bath designer. He did that for like 35 years, and he had a showroom that was in an outbuilding on our property, and so like I was around that my whole life. Dad had 2 drawing boards, drafting boards, and drew up his own, kitchen designs by hand back in the day, and so I guess that's somewhere embedded in my DNA and also just in my experience. And I actually do design work for a construction company. That's like that's what I do when I'm home, and so um, I do enjoy that, and that's it is a lot of fun. I didn't even know it was a skill that I had, but working in the trades my whole life, and I guess a little bit of what Dad had, you know, was imparted to me, and so yeah, I love doing it. It is fun. So it's nice to do it in my own house for a change than all those other houses.
I feel like, I mean, like the other day I had the dishwasher shit out on me, or it overflowed. It just didn't drain. And we had
Hmm.
paid someone to come out and take care of it the first time. And the
Hmm.
guy just looked at it, was like, you need to clean that out. And then handed me a $200 bill. And I was like, you didn't even do anything. And then I went
Yeah.
to YouTube and kind of quickly figured out how to fix the problem, or so I thought, and spent many an hour tucked into the dishwasher, which I think that they need to come up with a new way on how to fix dishwashers, because there's just no way of getting in there without being in an awkward angle where your back or neck or something's just not like all messed up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there isn't much of a better design. At least no one has come up with it yet. So any engineers
All
out
right.
there, get to
Well,
work.
that's
We need
actually
it.
why I have you on tonight. We're gonna solve this problem and we're gonna patent it, and then we are going to become thousandaires.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
The covers record, though, it's always interesting to me when bands kind of choose to go the route, either whether they bring out a cover in the live setting or on a record. I think it actually is more interesting on a record setting, because there's so many choices that one can make as to how original do we stay to the song, different tones, different ways to do something. And the song choices alone, I remember when like getting the email and I was like, 30 Seconds to Mars, all right. And then it was like Smashing Pumpkins, okay. And it was just like, I feel like someone of my age, being almost 40, I'm like, these are songs that are like right in my wheelhouse. I don't know if like the rest of like the fans of your band, because I feel like when I look at your band, I feel like it's a younger demographic. I'm like, is this one of those fun things where people are going to expose your fans to this quote unquote new music?
Yeah, I sure hope so. And uh, yeah, it. I like the idea of bringing people into what makes us us regarding our music, or what inspires us, or what we enjoy. And so, yeah, like covering, to some people, what's crazy is younger demographic, like Foo Fighters, they're just like an old man band, which is crazy to me because they're like, they've been making music as long as, like, I've been listening to Dave Grohl all throughout his career, ever since I first started liking music back in the day when I heard Nirvana. So it's like, to me, they're a band and he's an artist that I've been following ever since I like knew what rock music was. So, um, yeah, it's like hard to not consider bands like that for us to cover. But we wanted to do some new, some old, mix it up a bit, but also just pick songs that we enjoy, and songs that we felt like maybe could add a little bit of flavor to, from our style.
So like something that I like kind of getting into the weeds on when talking to people about like, bands that they're into, or even if they so choose to cover a song by a band, is what is the initial like entry point to be like, this is the one I want to do if we're going to do this? Like, what is it about the songs on this record that made you choose them?
There's obviously the thought of, to me, like, I guess our goal for a cover song is we would love to cover a song in a way that if they didn't know the song, they would just think it's another one of our songs. So something that I feel like could kind of fit into what we're already doing, as a band. Um, and so that's kind of like number one. Number two is, for me, lyrics are super important, and I think that's what makes a song what it is at the end of the day. And so, what the artist is saying, like, is that something that I feel like I can kind of embody and take on as well,
Right.
or translate in a different way through a different vehicle. But then also, it just has to be a song that we all genuinely like, and we're not trying to like, some people are like, oh, you're just trying to like jump on a bandwagon or catch trends. And it's like, we didn't pick, Pretender by Foo Fighters because we wanted to like hop on some trend. It's like we like just love that song. That's probably one of the best rock songs I've ever heard in my life.
It's a great song.
And so, yeah, and so like we wanted to just pick songs that we just loved, and because we wanted to do something that we were gonna just have fun with. No pressure. Um, kind of just get the feeling of like what it felt like to be young again and into music. So
When so some of like a song like to me, like when you get to like Pardon Me, that's a song that like even when I listen to it, and even like today I stumbled across, I didn't know this is a thing, Morning View 20th anniversary, like I guess it was a live stream, but it's them back at
yeah,
the house playing the album from start to finish in its entirety.
it's yeah, yep,
And it's one of those things like having just seen Incubus probably like 2 months ago, where it's still crazy to me, like how that band, just as essentially the like four of them, musicians outside of Brandon technically, are able to create all of those tones and textures almost like to a T. And it's not, in the day and age of Kempers and profilers, you see Mike up there doing all the all these things, and it's all being recreated live. And to me, that's so kind of a lost art of performing. But then even like when I listened to it, knowing I was going to talk to you today, I was like, I don't even know how you would know how to like start making these sound accurate enough and tone. And like a band like that, like, the Pretenders, like one thing that's just, kind of said a straight ahead rock song.
yeah,
But like we start into something like Incubus, to me, I'm like, you're really dialing in tones and kind of playing around with a lot of space and nuance. And so to me, it makes me wonder, when you take on the task instead of just being an active listener to it, what is it? What is the process for you to kind of figure all of these tones and things out and make your way through to find like the song essentially?
yeah. I love that you brought out all that stuff about the musicality of the guys in that band and the things that they created. Because that's really what you discover when you peel back the layers of any song, if you're saying you're going to cover it or just going to, yeah, you're going to learn it. And I loved for all of these songs is taking them apart. I had to think about, what do the drums do front to back? What does the bass do front to back? And seeing all the choices and decisions they make, the tones, and especially for, yeah, Pardon Me, that was the most intimidating part of that song, was the guitar effect. Um, wanting people to, because like when you hear that song cut in, it is so identifiable. It is like it's almost just as important as the chorus hook.
Right.
And so that was, yeah, that part of it, we're like, how I want to like keep it close to what it is, but also, so I had to figure out how he actually made that sound. And let me tell you, there's so much bad information out there about how he actually makes that sound.
Is it not just like double swelling essentially, like on the
No.
guitar and like a pedal?
No,
No?
because there's a number of, it's basically like, it's like making it like a baking a cake. There's like a lot of the ingredients are the same, but how they're balanced, that's the real challenge of it, of like how to balance, the different effects that he has on it. And yeah, there is a degree of swelling, but anyway, it's just to figure out what that is, to like learn that first, and then figure out, okay, how would I do this if I was going to recreate this, not just try and do the same exact thing perfectly, but just think about, what are my instincts? And that's really what we tried to do with all the songs, are, is if they were in the room teaching it to me, and go, okay, but then how would I reinterpret it through, my creative filter?
Is there a bit of a, all I can think of, and now I'm blanking on who the band is, but it's almost like a progression through unlearning kind of, but it's like, because you have to learn the source material and learn kind of what makes it, which I think would be really interesting, because I think you find more out about like the songwriting of those bands if you don't know it. Like you were saying earlier about how when you start to decide to cover a song, or at least learn it, you start kind of learning the nuances and stuff. And what gets interesting for me, like a band like a Chae, like their earlier stuff, it was interesting when the roles are kind of a little bit more defined in rhythm and lead, and Dan and Travis and what they play, that it was like, oh, I noticed like the chorus progressions were relatively the same. It's okay, these are going to be the same like 6 chords, give or take whatever pattern they're in. Then when you kind of start picking apart solos, you're like, okay, this is Travis, this is Dan, the nuances that they have individually and what they bring to it. But when you start getting into that side of things, it often makes me wonder, because I would assume you're still writing probably all the time when you have just to write ideas down and stockpile stuff. But when you do a project like this, have you noticed how it starts seeping into your own songwriting?
Yeah, and that was intentional. Because the whole project started off with, I had just been listening. I'd have the song Heathens in like a playlist of songs that I'd listen to, and then whenever it would come on, I always just say to myself, like, this is such a interesting and cool and melodic and like dark, brooding song that is like heavy in a pop sort of way. And I was like, it'd be really cool if somebody covered this. And I was just like, I just decided to just give it a whirl, just for fun, to show to the guys, because there's probably more material that I've showed the guys in the band than we've actually like put out, just
Right.
like songs that never made it and stuff like that. And they were all like, they loved it. They thought it was so cool. I mean, I literally just did like the intro and a verse and a chorus. That's all I sent to them. And they're like, you need to finish this. And I sent it to the label, and they were like, you need to are there more? And I was like, there could be. But I was just doing it to just figure out what I liked about that song. And what was interesting is, as I was working on these songs, just playing guitar, figuring out stuff, just like you do when you're writing, you just end up writing something by accident, and so like whether it was a guitar lead or a riff, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't work for this, but this could totally be a cool riff in another song. And I already have songs that have like come to light, that I've been working on from just like a guitar lead or something like that I was working on in this project. So it was cool to just make me think about even just my instrument, the guitar differently.
I mean, I would even wonder if potentially, I mean, because vocally, I mean, so far from what I've heard on this, like everything's pretty straightforward as far as like the same vocal melodies within reason. There's some different style of vocals where the other ones would be, but pretty true to that. But when looking at some of these songs, were there any that you wanted to challenge yourself with as far as trying to showcase a different side of your vocal range than you have before?
Yeah, definitely. And that was part of what I liked about the songs we picked, like a song like Heathens that had much more like hip hop cadence in the verses. Like that was a little bit more difficult for me to kind of get that locked in and get that rhythm good. And then also to I need to deliver that in a sellable way. I have a way
Right.
different voice than Tyler has. And so, you know, that that was kind of the challenge of all the songs is like, can I convince myself that I'm delivering these songs in a convincing way, like the 30 Seconds to Mars song Attack, Jared Leto has such an expressive, you know,
Mm-hmm.
theatrical, no pun intended, but theatrical voice, that I was like, I don't really sing like that, but let me figure out a way to kind of communicate that same sort of feeling, so all the songs really did present, because you have to look at what makes that performance so strong. And for me, I was trying to find ways to learn from them, really, like kind of borrow from what they're really good at, and go, can I deliver something like that? And so I really love that challenge, and it's made me honestly feel a lot more comfortable as a singer,
Mm-hmm.
with trying different stuff moving forward.
Well, I remember when Attack was, because I think that was the second or third single that was released off of this, because at this point you got 5.
Hmm.
Um, but it was a thing where, I mean, anyone can kind of feel however they feel about 30 Seconds to Mars. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people just look at them as sort of a quote unquote, like, oh, it's that band, the Jared Leto's band. But I think for me, it comes from a little bit more of a different place, having seen them on the first record that they pretty much don't play anything off of or even acknowledge. Um, having
We
seen them
almost,
on that,
I yeah, I almost picked the song "Battle of One." I don't know if you know that song
oh,
from that
yep.
first album. It's crazy good.
It randomly, because sometimes I'll just throw like my entire like iTunes on shuffle and just
Yeah,
let it go.
yeah.
And Welcome to the Universe and Echelon happened to come on pretty quickly after each other. And I was like, man, these songs still hold up. Like they could throw
Hmm.
them into the set now, and I don't think it would sound as different as some of the rest of the material, like, or even like how they like Buddha for Mary kind of could work too. But I think it showcases that like they always were able to, from the jump, wrote great songs with good, catchy vocal
Yeah,
melodies and choruses. And it was a thing where to see how much success they ended up achieving over the years, I'm not surprised.
it's
I think
crazy. Yeah.
what gets kind of crazy is, it's like the jump from the sonic territory and even Jared's like vocals from that first 30 Seconds to Mars record to what is it, A Beautiful Lie or whatever, I can't
Yeah,
remember what the
Beautiful
second record
Lie.
was called.
Yeah.
And then even the third one with Kings and Queens, which is still
Kings
probably
and
one of my
Queens.
low key favorite songs. Like when I just like, I'll throw that on and I'll listen to that for like an hour straight. And I'm just like, God, this everything about this song just is magical.
It's like
From the
it was
production, vocals, and everything.
it's like they said, we want to write a U2 song, and they did.
It's like U2 mixed with like Queen. That's the only way I can
Yeah.
describe what Kings and Queens sounds like to me, like in a traditional sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I get what you're saying. I think people do kind of underrate, um, their talent, because it is kind of masked by, the fact he's an actor. But I'll tell you what, I don't know many other actors that have had that sort of success musically at all. It's
Not
pretty
to like the cultish level
shocking.
that they do.
Yeah, well, they're huge, but it's not also they're not just like it's the music's good, you know. And some people may think it's lame that I think it's good, but I don't care.
I think that was kind of the other thing too in looking at this is like I would say, like I said, 90% of it, like looking at it, like just track listing right out the gate, it was like, I mean, this is peak like 2002 to like 2007 me like mix CDs. Like what if I had a like car with a mix CD, like most of this is probably in it on it, and
Yeah.
I'm jamming it and loving it and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of a thing too sometimes that like a friend of mine had kind of coined this term when doing a different podcast with them about like when we would talk about a band's discography. And he would call some bands like a playlist band where they're not any one thing. They're a lot of different things. And therefore it kind of feels like you're listening to a playlist. And to me, what was kind of fun about this is there's a little bit of something for everybody, I think. Like, and even, and like you said, like I listen to this and it's songs that make you have fun. Like, like you can sing with people like in your car, and like there's the record, like the nostalgia factor, or for some maybe who will be listening to some of these songs for the first time, like that new sense of discovery because you don't know what's next, because it's not just this is this band and it's going to sound kind of the same because it's,
Mhm.
them. And to me, like, I feel like there's just a lot of joy in a project like this that maybe when doing something creative on your side, because it probably does become a little bit of a job to a degree, that doing something like this kind of takes it back to where it all started, where it's like, I have an instrument and I'm just having fun playing and covering songs and sharing music with people and having fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head because that's how I looked at it, you know. Um, we've been a band for like 15 years now, and uh, it was just it felt like a little bit of like a sigh of like relief. It's like let's just do something fun, and because I kind of needed to hit a bit of a like just a hard reset button for myself creatively, um, and this was kind of like a fun stopgap. And we also live in a day and age where you just have to keep putting out content, you know, as a band, and so it kind of checked a few boxes. And you know, people are like, "Oh, you're gonna turn into a cover band." We're like, "Nah, we're not. It's just this was just fun, you know." And the reality is like we're not tied to a corporation. We don't have a boss. Like we work with a record label. They were into the idea, our management was, and we were, and so we just did it. And we're still gonna. I mean, we have tons of new music, you know, that we're working on still. And this was just a bit of like, you know what? Let's just do it. You know, we'd always talked about doing it. You know, there's lots of things I know a lot of bands always talk about, like, yeah, we'll do it one of these days. And I was like, no, we just one of these days isn't going to exist anymore. So I was like, let's just go for it.
I mean, indirectly, I think we all went through one of those time periods where, like, we all had one of those days for like 2 years
Yeah.
where you could do something.
Yeah.
I think actually it was kind of interesting. Like when I was looking up the video for Breaking the Habit, one of the first comments that like I at least noticed, I don't know if it populates like the newest one or the most popular one or whatever, but someone had commented, they're like, when is the new stuff? When is their own stuff coming out? And I was like, like you have a really loyal fan base when you can do a really good cover and everyone's like, this is so good, Chester forever, like all these kind of things.
Yeah.
And then someone's just like, I want their own music.
I know it's flattering, but at the same time, it's just kind of like you know, it's like cool your jets. Like, you know, we just put out an album, you know, a year ago.
No, it's too
You
long ago.
know, I know we put it and we gave them new music in the winter as well. You know, and it's like now you're getting new content from us. It's like more's coming. Don't worry. You know, but like yeah, I've never been in a position where I was upset that a band was giving us more. You know, that was kind of the part for me where I was just like, you have to understand how that sounds from the artist perspective, and also for me as a music appreciator. Like if I could get more music from bands that I love, I'd be stoked. Even if I think it's not as good as dot dot dot, I'm still excited to get something new. Because the other part of it too is I don't think people understand is there's always this weighing and measuring of like, oh, well, it's not as good as X album or this. If you like the artist and you like the music they make, not all the music is going to be better than maybe this one thing they did, but if it's still good and you like it, you don't need to measure it or compare it. Just consume it and enjoy it. Um, my wife is a really good cook. There's meals that she makes that are better than others, but I don't eat that meal and go, this one isn't as good as the one you made 2 weeks ago. Like, it's just, she would just be like, shut up.
That just gave me like the greatest idea for random content, which would be the meal you made 15 years ago was way better. The practice version of this, the demo version of this was way better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. That's what I think about is like, if I made any of those sorts of comments to my wife about things, she would just be heartbroken and so offended. And it's like, if you're a diehard fan, just be a diehard fan and just wait patiently. We're gonna give you new music, but that's a whole other thing. So I assume it's a minority, or maybe it's a majority. I don't know. The reality is,
I don't know.
I don't lose a minute of sleep over it.
Well, I think like even that kind of stuff, as we're now like in some bands, like, yourself, like a 15-year career, you have like several albums under your belt. And I think there was like a comment, and I don't think I'm talking out of turn with this, because like I can't remember if it's something Brandon said, like from a Chae who had said to like me when we were hanging out at one point, or if it was something he said somewhere else and I read it or something. But he had made a comment about like, the cliche thing of, if you want to hear stuff off of like Suicide Notes or The Curse, you can go listen to that record. It exists. It will always be there. But he had made a comment. He goes, if you look at like our Spotify numbers and stuff like that, which is quote unquote the most telling information about what is actually being listened to, it's all the new stuff.
Yeah.
He goes, for a band to be this far into our careers and have the newer stuff by far and away outperform the old stuff, clearly shows that we're doing our best stuff now, and it's like people are attaching to it. And so I would almost feel like kind of the same. Like, it seems like, your last like 2 records seemingly are the ones everyone really loves, not discrediting what came before it, but I think you're kind of in that same boat where it's like, by and large, the new stuff you're putting out, and maybe that's why the fans are so clamoring for something new, because like they just have really been identifying wherever they're at in their lives currently with the stuff you're putting out currently with them.
Yeah, I mean, and you'll never make everyone happy. I think the point that you were saying, the singer of Chae was making, is true. And people, I think it's hard for fans to understand what it's like to be an artist and create and want to do something new. And it's not like we took down, it's not like they took down the first 2 albums, like they're still available for people to listen to and enjoy. And it's also kind of like, isn't it really like selfish, and aren't you not really a supporter if you like want them to make something they wouldn't enjoy making? That right there is selling out. You're basically asking artists to sell out, even though they think what they're doing now is selling out. If they're making what they want to make, and you may think, oh, well, it's a lot more commercially acceptable. Well, if that's what they want to make, then just let them make that. It's like, you don't get to determine what their tastes are. So I don't know. As I've gotten older, I've found, like, just kind of let people make what they want to make. You don't really know. You can't really judge their motives or their intentions, because you don't know them. And so, if you don't want to listen, just hit the next track.
Speaking of the next track, there's a song on here I've really been interested to hear, and I was kind of bummed I didn't get the advance of the record, because Diamond Eyes. I mean, Deftones is one of my favorite bands, like, ever. And that record especially is very... Oh, I saw it. I saw it. That record in particular for me is also a very special one. Like the last of the standard edition, because like now that with the deluxe edition, there's like extra songs at the end. That record, like the last like 3 songs, really, from basically Rocket Skates on, those 3 songs, you know, I think are probably the perfect 3 songs, one right into the next, especially to end a record that's already very strong.
Mm-hmm.
But Diamond Eyes, I think as a whole, is like what a comeback basically for them, given what had happened to them with Chae and all that kind of stuff, and wondering where does the band go from here. You hear a scrapped record happened, and then this is the first thing we
And
hear.
yeah.
And to me, it's one where I think universally we can all agree that Chino has some very, very large shoes to fill vocally. So when I saw that on the track listing, I was like, I don't know. I'm interested. I'm interested to see how this goes, because it's such an interesting thing. And like even like the end breakdown kind of like bridge kind of outro that they do on that, I could totally see you guys taking that a little bit like in a heavier direction. But it's, I don't know, I'm very intrigued to see, because I it's nothing against you. I'm very weary because I haven't really heard a good Deftones cover, because it all rests basically on the vocals.
Yeah, no, and I'm totally aware of that. The cover, I'll just put it this way, the cover is not what you think it's going to be at all.
Okay.
Because they already are a heavy band, and so our thought was it's really a beautiful song, and I actually, the lyrics were lost on me a lot of the time until I actually sat down and read them when I thought about covering it. Actually, I covered it I just like on my phone and just put it up on Instagram during lockdown. I just covered it on the acoustic because I was listening to a song and I was like, okay, what is this song even about? You know, so I looked it up, and it was such a beautiful song when you kind of strip everything away. And so that was kind of the approach we took with this, because I didn't really feel like we could touch the heavy way that song's already like, you just gotta just,
Right.
what am I gonna do? Like, I'm not gonna change Stephen Carpenter's riff, it's just, that's what everyone's trying to copy anyway, so it's like, why would you try to,
Right.
you can't make it better. And so we just tried to maybe take the opposite approach and kind of peel back the layers, kind of like what you've seen people do in the past, of like the way Johnny Cash covered Hurt. It's like strip
Right.
back the layers and let the song speak a little bit more.
I think the crazy thing with Deftones, as of more recently, mainly Steph, I'll say, with him doing those guitar playthroughs, is seeing like it is almost the living embodiment of like it's not the riff, it's not the gear, it's not whatever, it's the person. Because like that dude pretty much uses this, like I said, kind of going back to the Atreyu thing of like learning their stuff. That dude uses essentially a lot of the exact same progressions and same chords and stuff, but it's like from White Pony on, where he started introducing the 7-string and then the baritones and then the down tuning 7 and 8 strings and figuring out a way to change and add depth, kind of going back to the Incubus thing almost. He's done the same thing Mike does in a completely different facet, where it's not layered with a bunch of like pedals and textures and tones necessarily. It's just adding a little bit of like nuance, really, and it's his nuance. Because like watching him even play something like Rocket Skates or Diamond Eyes or whatever, it's like it's the most simple riff, but it's just what he does to it that makes it like just sound massive and crushing and like something you would never think to do.
Yeah, well, that was the thing I was going to say is, when you actually learn that riff, you go, oh, I would have never thought to do this, because it actually seems
Right.
wrong,
Yeah.
but that's what you love about artists like that, is that they just like don't care. They're not thinking about what would be wrong. They're just kind of making, and they're like, oh, this is cool, and sometimes it's a happy accident, but lots of cool stuff comes out that way.
Well, it's almost like a really good reminder at times. Like sometimes it's just about like how something feels. Like it could be the simplest riff. I mean, that's like I remember seeing the guys in Meshuggah show you how to play Bleed, and I was like, that's it. It's one note, just bent and then released and then bent again. Like that's it. But I was like, that's okay. All right. And it
What's
just kind
tough?
of makes
Yeah,
you realize that it's like that's sort of what Steph does. It's like it almost becomes so simplistic, it becomes so hard because we want to make something more complicated than it needs to be at
exactly.
its
Yeah,
foundation.
yeah. That threshold is very tight, between because like yeah, the Diamond Eyes riff that gets played for a long time throughout the song, but you don't ever get tired of it, and it's hard to write something that is that simple, but you don't get tired of it. Um, and the thing that I've noticed nowadays with heavy music, it's like the riff can't ever repeat the same way. There has to be so many changes and uh glitches, and it's like almost frenetic in some senses. And for me, yeah, I kind of like the idea of a riff kind of sitting and just appreciating it for what it is. But yeah, I still have to write a good riff, so that's the challenge of it.
I'm always blown away when people somehow just write great great riffs. Like I said, going to see Incubus and stuff like that. Like the only thing that was a little bit different this time, and I don't know if you noticed this, maybe seeing or listening to them, but like if you've seen them somewhat recently, is the songs sound exactly the way that they always did. Like listening to stuff off of Morning View or even like A Crow Left to the Murder or whatever. It's like they still sound exactly the same, but they don't to me hit. They don't seem as aggressive anymore. They seem a little more like muted and like kind of like the anger is more focused, for lack of a better term. I don't know. I like hearing a song like Circles. I was like, this riff and like the
Yeah,
whole thing when the whole band comes in used to hit a lot harder. And then as I'm sitting
yeah,
there looking at it, I'm like, it sounds exactly the same as it does on record, but for some reason it
yeah,
just doesn't seem like it hits as hard.
yeah. Some of that could just, without being disrespectful, could just be like you don't have the same angst now that you're older, or kind of energy or aggression to, you know, performing that song. But it doesn't take anything away from them because, yeah, I watched that same performance you talked about in the house that they did. And yeah, I thought a similar thing, but I also thought, how are they so good? Because the reality is it's the same thing too. Like some of my favorite one of my favorite bands is Thrice, and seeing them
Yep.
perform songs off of their older records, they don't hit the same like they used to, but it is kind of, but I still like hearing them play it and how they're playing it now, you know. Some songs are actually better now. Others I definitely preferred, early back in the day, but you know, it's just that's the beauty of live performance is it shouldn't be exactly the same.
I guess a last question I have for you before I let you go. So we're talking about kind of doing things, to keep things fresh for you with this like covers record and so forth, and showcasing like kind of things that inspired you from to maybe pick up an instrument or whatever. And now we were just kind of talking about, a band re-recording some stuff and like even Thrice just redoing Artist in the Ambulance.
Yeah.
Is that something like how they did that, where they kind of kept it true to its original tone, but kind of added some of the maybe like what they're doing with these songs live or have been or changing some things? Would that be something that would interest you maybe with some of your older material to kind of give it fresh life and breathe fresh life into it?
Possibly, I wouldn't discount the idea. Um, there'd have to be a pretty strong feeling for all the guys for us to do that. So it's definitely not it's not out of that's not an out of left field thought, but um, yeah, I would want to be really sure about doing that before doing that because one, it's a lot of work and you got to really mean it. But part of the reality is, I'm pretty sure one of the reasons they did it was so that they could own the masters of that version of the album. So
Yeah, that
that,
usually is why that happens. The re-record
yes,
or the sunset clause is up.
yeah. So um, I'm sure that weighed into the decision as well, especially on a 20-year, but for us, we're not in that situation, so it'd have to be like purely creative and like feel like we
I
want
mean, you're
to.
not too far away, man. You got like 5 years.
Actually, it's further than you think for a 20-year. That's for sure for our first album. But yeah, it's tough. No, you'll never make everybody happy. That's for sure.
No. Lastly, where can everyone find you or anything you would like to plug online?
On all streaming platforms, you can find us on Instagram, Wolves at the Gate. That's probably as much as I hate social media, that's the one I keep up with the most. And YouTube, that's your jam. We're there too. So we're pretty much everywhere you'd want to find us, except for the people that are upset that we don't have compact discs of everything. So
Yeah, I was just say you're not super active on socials yourself, because I remember going like after following you, I was like, man, I don't feel like I've seen him post in a while. Am I not interacting with the page enough? Like, because that happens.
no,
And then I was like, no, you just don't, you just don't
no.
post.
When we have music coming out. Funny story, I wouldn't have an Instagram if it wasn't for our guitar player, because when it came out, our management told us, all right, everybody has to have everybody needs to get an Instagram, and I'm like, I don't want one of those things. And all the guys made one except for me. And then Jeremy, he actually made an account for me with my name and everything. And he's like, I'm going to post embarrassing pictures of you until you decide you're going to take control of it. And I was like, so I basically got blackmailed into having an Instagram. And so that's why I have it. It's cool. I like interacting with people when I get the chance, but like the only time I post stuff mostly is when we got music coming out. So
there you go. Well, thank you again for taking the time. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully you guys will be coming touring around Michigan at least, so I can try to come see you guys.
Yeah, that'd be rad, man.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you too. See you.
Yeah.
So that was my conversation with Steve, and I want to thank him again for taking the time. Always a pleasure chatting with him. Just kind of a lot about different things. I think that's kind of the fun thing about someone like Steve is, he can kind of understand kind of stepping back from a creative process of something and kind of get a little in the weeds on it and understand kind of maybe more of what drives this thing. And I think with the covers record that the band did, it's interesting to kind of navigate how to attack, no pun intended, a cover. Do you keep it original? Is there something, look at the Diamond Eyes cover. At the time I hadn't heard that. Obviously the record's been out for about a month now. But it's a thing where the Diamond Eyes cover, it starts off exactly as the song is, but then it kind of goes more toward that ethereal type of sound, which when you hear it, everything still feels like it's the song and have come to know. Then there's a song like Attack, which is more straightforward. I mean, there's just the way that like you have to kind of navigate this thing to kind of make it its own. So many choices you can make, and to kind of see how Steve and the guys end up sort of making those choices, and even how it kind of informs maybe you're listening to that band, that song moving forward. Like, how is it that you picked out this melody, or how is it that you came to realize this little thing was there, and then now you're expounding upon that musical concept or that melody or this whatever to kind of formulate your version of this song around that. And I think it's kind of one of the things just about songwriting as a whole that is interesting when you kind of start picking apart the pieces of the puzzle and figuring out how it works. It's baffling. It's a thing that sometimes doesn't make sense, and I, as a very rudimentary guitar player at best, it's a thing where when I've been learning different band songs, like I remember many, 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 many years ago learning a bunch of System of a Down songs and being like, Darren likes to write his choruses around this pattern, give or take, how the progression is played, but typically it's the same 4 or 5 notes. Same thing with Green Day. Like you start learning, and then it's like you start learning that people have rhythms and tendencies. And once you kind of start unpacking that, you're just like, oh, that's really interesting that I never paid attention to this until it took me literally trying to learn this person's song. That it's like, oh, I'm starting to understand how you consistently write, because it's the same people. We fall into patterns and so forth. So it's just sometimes some riffs, they work, and the combination thereof, like the melodies just work, and it's a thing. So it's to me, I always find it interesting. Cover songs. How do you choose to go about it? And also, if you subsequently realize, like, has any of it seeped into your own songwriting once you've kind of broken down a song that you're going to cover in a recorded sense, I should say, but also, I guess, in a live sense if you're going to play it. But it's just it's interesting, and I think Steve has an interesting brain to kind of work through all of that. Plus, I mean, some people might look at the covers album track listing and just kind of be like, those are weird bands. I wouldn't assume that, but I can't tell you how many times like I get that like at work somewhat recently, just to kind of save on my headphone time because I have wireless headphones, Bluetooth headphones, and I don't always want to have them in my ears all fucking day. So sometimes I will have my phone playing out loud because I'm in an area all by myself at a desk, and it's funny, some people will walk by and I might be listening to like Alanis Morissette and people are like, I didn't think you would listen to something like this. And it's like, I'm of this era. Coincidentally enough, actually, speaking of Alanis Morissette, I just checked out the new Ice Nine Kills song that dropped today or yesterday. I'm not entirely sure which day it actually dropped, but Meet and Greet. And I just couldn't help but think that the chorus melody, the vocal melody, sounded so much like Uninvited by Alanis Morissette. And I was like, does it really, or is it just like my brain playing like, this melody sort of sounds familiar, and that's the first thing that came to my head? But I don't know. I'm probably the only one that's going to hear that song and pull Alanis Morissette out of my ass as a possible reference for a melody. But it's fun. I love listening to all kinds of different music, and I don't know. Like I kind of said in the chat too, it's like it's kind of a bummer when people just limit themselves to a genre and don't really go beyond it. And I guess that's kind of your own journey to take, but it's one that I think is very rewarding and enriching to be able to kind of listen to so many different things. I mean, I've even been doing that with the podcast as of late. I've been kind of branching out into some different things that aren't entirely within the realm of what I listen to. So I was listening to Rick Rubin's podcast lately, and it's so interesting because Rick Rubin obviously has made, or had a hand, I should say, in making some of the biggest records of all time in so many different genres, rap, metal, just everything. And it just becomes this thing where everything I've really heard about him and I've heard in interviews with him, I just feel like he's sort of like aloof was all I could come up with, but also that I feel like so much of it's just bullshit. Like, I mean, by all accounts, the dude literally doesn't know how to do any of the shit that he does. He doesn't know how to produce anything. He doesn't know how to turn the knobs and do anything. And so for the longest time, I just was like, I feel like this is like an industry, like not very well kept secret that Rick Rubin really isn't a producer. He doesn't really do anything. And then I started listening to his podcast with all kinds of different people. Started with the Trent Reznor episode. I just finished the Whitney Cummings episode yesterday as of when I'm recording this. And what's always baffling about the couple of episodes I've checked out so far is how little, for it being his own podcast, that he's actually talking. And it's really almost like a therapy session for the guest, where they kind of work through things. They talk about something, and even like with the Trent Reznor episode, there was a moment in it that really stuck with me and resonated with me, where Trent was talking about making the first Nine Inch Nails record and how he was flying out to have two people mix the album. And one of them ended up doing Head Like a Hole and then was like, well, here's your chorus, like move this around, do this. And he was like, I never would have thought of that. And he was speaking to it in a very positive sense. The second producer, who I'm blanking on off the top of my head, but they just fought. It sounded like he just didn't trust the person's vision, opinions, anything. And it just turned into Trent being like, basically, don't piss me off and don't get in my way, and let's just try to get this done. And because Trent knew what his vision was and didn't want to dilute it to being something that was unauthentic to himself. And Rick stopped him kind of toward the end there and was just like, it's really great that you gave yourself the permission to do that and to understand that you had boundaries and, a lot of therapy terms. And same sort of with Whitney Cummings, like, she was talking about a lot of insecurities and not being able to make decisions or feeling like maybe she would make the wrong decision. And she had read his book and was talking about the coin flip thing that he does. And you know, I saved the clip because it actually really resonated with me, where he was saying, you know, the whole point of the coin flip thing isn't necessarily for it to judge, or not to judge, but to determine your outcome on something. But it's really that you have to listen to yourself and understand that when you flip the coin, if there is one way you are leaning that the coin would go, so if you're picking heads for something or tails for the other, that if internally when you flip this coin, or the thought of flipping a coin makes you go, I hope it lands on whatever that is, then you should listen to that. You know, the actual device of flipping a coin is arbitrary, but it's in what your inner self is telling you. You should listen to it. And so there's things like that as I listen to this show, where there's always kind of this moment where it's like, oh, fuck, that's so profound. And actually, there's quite a few of them. And it just becomes this thing where I really, really think that is the thing I guess I never correlated to Rick Rubin is maybe he's not a producer in the traditional sense of like, I push these buttons, I'm recording you, I'm doing whatever. But I think he's actually providing a completely different service, which is allowing the artists to produce what maybe they are insecure to produce, maybe getting in their own way. And I think when I kind of put what he does into that prism, I think, or that lens, I should say, that it really, I think, does showcase how smart he is, because he's essentially doing the same thing, whereas opposed to like someone going, oh, you should pick up this guitar and you should play this, or this should do this. It's like, get out of your own way, create what you really are feeling and what you really want to say and maybe are too afraid to, and just do it. And it's incredible. There's a reason this dude is so prolific. I also don't know that I could ever live my life sounding so calm as he does at all times. Dude is crazy smart. So if you haven't checked out any of those, go ahead. There's quite a few episodes. They're on YouTube in an audio format, as well as obviously on your podcast catcher thing that you listen to your podcast on. Didn't necessarily mean to plug someone else's show or go on another random tangent, but something I've been thinking a lot more about lately and having deeper connections to. And I think that does correlate to the Wolves at the Gate covers record, because these are songs that Steve and the guys really resonated with and felt a deeper connection to and wanted to put their own stamp on it. So there we go. That's how I brought it all back together. Going to start wrapping up this episode since this part got a little bit long on me. If you would like to keep up with Wolves at the Gate, it is really, really simple. Wolves at the Gate on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, website, Wolves at the Gate. So simple. If you'd like to keep up with Steve, you can find him on Instagram at Cobucci, Scobucci, and Twitter at Stephen Cobucci. Whole name, all in the show notes. Look there. You can also follow the podcast at BrewSpeak on all your major platforms of social media as they currently exist. We also have an email. You can email me at brewtallyspeaking@gmail.com if you would like to suggest a guest, keep a comment about something going. It's been really nice, actually, the last handful of episodes, last couple of weeks or so, people actually reaching out, sending DMs, messages, and so forth, and it's been really fun getting to kind of continue on with some of these things. The funner one is usually, and I haven't had it happen in a while, is when someone will almost kind of pick up from a conversation I had with somebody, but they don't really explain what episode they're listening to or like what the context was. And they're just, or I guess they do kind of say the episode, but when they mention something from like 4.5, 5 years ago, and I have to kind of like put my brain back into that headspace of like, what did I say? What were we talking about? Oh yeah. But it's all fun. It's sort of, you know, the joy of doing this and people finding the episodes whenever they happen to. So email me, reach out, send a Facebook message, send a DM on Instagram, whatever. Love chatting, obviously. And I want to thank our sponsors, as always, for their continued support of me and the show. Head on over to rockabilia.com, use our code BRUTALLY at checkout, take 10% off your total purchase order. Lots of cool stuff coming out around this holiday season for Halloween and so forth. Frankie and the crew over there are just killing it right now with all these like, you know, specific drops, these curated drops. They're working with various artists and doing some really cool stuff. So head on over there and check out what they are up to and save some money while you're at it. And Starving Artist Brewery, I want to thank them, as always, for making great beer, being great people, and just creating a really awesome atmosphere to support community and community around beer drinking. Even if it's not necessarily your thing, I think we can all agree by their motto, judge beer, not people, especially in this day and age. There's a lot of things like that cause divisiveness. So it's just easier to try to keep a level head. So with that said, I am John. I will talk to you all next week, where our guest is Telly from The Word Alive. That was a really good one. Got really deep in that one. Haven't talked to Telly since the last record, Monomania, and that was a good chat, but we'll get into that next week with Telly. So I will talk to you all then. Enjoy the rest of your week.